Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm Rob and today we're going to be painting some Custodes. So I've been wanting to do this for a little while. Lots of people ask me how I paint my golds, and this is going to take you through how one way I paint my golds and how I would go about doing it. So this is the finished Custodian guard model that we're going to be working on. The main features of this tutorial are going to be the gold, obviously some of the leather elements, the plume, the purple plume, and then the blue sword as well. We won't go through every single detail on this model, but the kind of the broad brush strokes and kind of like the main parts that are going to help you to get a Custodes army off the ground. So we're going to start with a black undercoat. For our Custodian Guard miniature, and then we're going to start off with rough iron. The coverage on rough iron is excellent. This basically just needs one coat, and this is just going to this is just going to be the coverage. Rough iron, if you've not got it, it's a great it's an absolutely kind of fantastic color that you could weather this up, you could add verdigris to it, and it will look excellent. But as a base for our Custodes to build up our gold over, it's going to work really, really well as well. And then we're going to move on to greedy gold. So greedy gold, really lovely gold color, especially kind of over the rough iron. Like it works really, really nicely. It's actually quite a warm, rich color over that rough iron. And I'm using an airbrush today, but if you don't have an airbrush, you could just do this by hand. You could do this with some heavy dry brushing. And that's actually really what I'd recommend. I would recommend doing this with some dry brushing. But you don't need a very precise airbrush to do what I'm doing. I'm just hitting it from one direction. And this is important. So I'm not doing kind of a zenith all over. What I'm doing is I'm picking a direction light is coming from the front, and then hitting it with the airbrush from that side, and then I do the reverse on the back. So I basically have two light sources, one from coming in from the right and one coming in from the right on the other side of the model, and then this makes for quite dynamic shadows. Which is what I think you want with your Custodian Guard. Sometimes they can just look like a mass of gold, and I think sometimes actually we need to be a little bit more dynamic with our highlights and our shading, and this is just an easy way to do it. So just pick a direction the light is coming from that you think will kind of suit the model best, and then just go for it. And what you can see me doing is just building up those coats of greedy gold. The greedy gold's been thinned with some thinner, probably in about a 1-to-1 ratio, and then you can see there are some dark elements on the Custodian Guard where you can still see the rough iron showing through, and then you've got this greedy gold on top. I did highlight just around the head though, because that's one of the key features, so I did that on both sides. We're going to go for bright gold now. This is bright. It's a really lovely yellow gold. I think this is a good one to use if you're doing something like Emperor's Children, but it's also quite a good natural highlight for greedy gold as well. We will be coming to do brush highlights with this color a little bit later. So we will be using it again, unlike the rough iron and unlike the greedy gold. The bright gold here is one that we are definitely going to be using. Right, Hive to a purple and purple tone. Now, it took me a while to get to kind of like the right ratio here, but basically I would say it's probably 3 parts Hive Dweller to 1 part purple tone to make basically a airbrush wash. And what you can see me doing here is actually spraying this into the opposite side of the model. So this is actually being sprayed into the shadows of the model, and this is just going to help reinforce those shadows. Now, why am I using purple? I'm using purple because it is a contrasting color to yellow. Obviously, we've got a golden yellow there, and actually purple is a contrasting color to that. So it's going to really make the those contrasting colors is going to make the yellow pop, right? And they're just colors that work together really nicely. In terms of the shadows, where am I hitting them? Just on the bottom of the shoulder pads here, you can see where the light isn't catching, basically where that rough iron is, but also around the helmet and around the wings as well, because I just want a little bit of shading there. It's okay if you do this a little bit too much, because we're going to go back in with our bright gold a little bit later, so we can tighten up some of those highlights. So don't worry about overdoing it, but just be a little bit careful as you go through this process. Think about where the rough iron is left over, and that's really where you want to be hitting this kind of like purple speed paint tone mix that I've got. Now, this is the important part, the wash. So purple tone, light tone. Really important that we get the ratios right here. So we're going to use 10 drops of light tone, followed by 10 drops of purple tone. Now, if you're doing a big batch of Custodian Guard, I'd really recommend doing this in bulk. So you do like one bottle of purple tone and one bottle of light tone. From here, we're going to add in 2 drops of gloss varnish. Now, this is going to help with the flow. It's also going to maintain the luster of the golds as well. One thing we don't want is when we've got like matte washes going over gold, we don't want to completely kill it. We do 1 drop of Hive Dweller Purple, which is the color that we used previously, and then we're going to use 2 or 3 drops of Hardened Leather. I think my intention was to use 1 drop. I think I ended up using 2, but it still came out really nice anyway. So I was pleased with the kind of like the mix and the color. And what we want to do is create kind of like a purpley brown tone. You can make, as I say, a big batch of this up, but I'm going to help it flow a little bit further with a little bit of airbrush medium. I think I used, there we go, so that was 5 drops of airbrush medium there, and that just helps it to get it moving. It's obviously got a little bit of flow improver as well, it helps it become basically a wash. And then this wash we are going to use all over our Custodian Guard. But what I would say is that you don't want it to pool in areas really heavily. Like, obviously, a wash needs to pool in the nooks and the crannies, of course, but we don't want it to kind of like pool around the feet in big clumps or big droplets that basically dries and it doesn't look very nice. So just bear that one in mind. It's worth taking your time on this. And what you can see this wash doing now, although there's purples in it, the browns, the hardened leather and the light tones within it actually warms up the golds here as well. But still within those shadows you can still tell there's purple, it still works together as a contrasting color. So this mix I find is quite a good one for custodians. And you could use this wash. You can make up a big batch of it, and you could use this wash on any kind of golds that you do moving forward, right? It's kind of like a magical gold wash that you can use. As I say, just be careful when you're applying it. You don't want it to build up in areas where it's unsightly. And the other thing is that it starts now to become looking less airbrushed. It looks like the darker shadows that we created with that Hive Dweller Purple, that it starts to kind of like look harmonize all together. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going back in with the bright gold, and just on the tippity top highlights, some of the edges, the most prominent edges, what I'm doing with the bright gold is I'm just going in and just doing some further highlights. And you can see here just the top of the top of the helmet, the top of the wings on the helmet, just reinforcing those highlights. This is a little bit time consuming. If you've got like 20 custodies to do, you could go and do one a day, for example, one in do one half an hour a day, and you'll get through them within a month, right? It can be quite time consuming, and if you do want to take those highlights further up, you can always mix in a little bit of silver into this mix to go even brighter if you want to. Sometimes adding silver into golds has a little bit of a desaturating effect on it, so just be mindful of that. That's why I've just stuck to just the bright gold here. I didn't want to desaturate the golds at all, but I think it is important that you need to go around and just do a little bit of the most prominent highlights. And actually you can see going around here that purple tone and that purple color in the shadows along with the wash. I think it works really, really nicely. And I think this would work on custodian like dreadnoughts, custodian vehicles as well. So Grimdark. Now I painted all the leather elements around the arm straps, the leather turquoises, and then the rubber soft armor elements. I've painted them matte white, and then what you can see me doing here is going in with Grim Black speed paint. Now I think this is a really quick way to do soft armor joints and elements, but you do need 2 thin coats, otherwise it just appears grey rather than black. You want it to read as black with some like nice gentle grey highlights. This at the moment, when it dries on the first round, it's not quite where you want it to be, so it definitely needs 2 coats of that Grim Black, and then you can always matte it down. Right, Terrestial Titan, Diabolic Plum and Hexed Violet. Now these 3 colours are going to be critical for creating our purple plume. Why am I using a purple plume rather than red? Well, it's a little bit different, isn't it? It makes your army stand out, but also it's a contrasting color. It's purple against the yellows. So that's why I'm essentially using it, because you've got something again that contrasts. It's constantly thinking about contrasting colours with our miniatures to help that gold really pop out. So you can see me here just laying those 3 colours down on our wet palette. These are magentas, but also violets and purple, sorry, as well. So these are magentas and purples. The mid one, Diabolic Plum, is obviously a magenta. And you can see I'm making a mid color between Terrestial Titan and Diabolic Plum. And then what I will end up doing is creating a mix between Diabolic Plum, it's tough to say when I'm trying to say it quickly, and then Hexed Lichen as well. Hexed Violet as well. Now, this mix of Terrestial Titan and Diabolic Plum, that is the mix I'm going to be using just to base coat the plume. So I won't go as dark as Terrestial Titan. I felt on the palette, I was like, oh, that's just a little bit too dark for what I want. But that mix between the 50/50 Terrestial Titan and Diabolic Plum is the one you want as base coat. And you can actually see, just going off piste here, the first round of the Grim Black and the leather, and you can actually see that actually is quite grey at the moment. It still reads as white actually, just with like a black wash over the top of it. So that's why you need to have 2 coats of it to make it work. As I say though, go around, do your plumes. You can pick out some other purple elements, and it'll be up to you whether you want to make the gems purple. I'm going to do them red, and a quick way to show you how a little bit later. But actually, if you're thinking of doing all the gems and the eye lenses purple, then now will be the time to do those, as you've got these paints on your palette. Then we're going to go straight up for Diabolic Plum. Now, with our Diabolic Plum, what we're going to do is we're going to be highlighting the top of the plume. Now we don't want to almost highlight every single strand of hair. We really want to focus on where the light it kind of would hit naturally. If you think, you can Google pictures of hair and where that would hit. But we can be quite broad with this initial highlight. This is going to dry a little bit darker than it looks in the hand right now. I have found that with the Warpaint Fanatics, they just dry just a slight, little bit darker than what they would be when they go on. But as I say, we don't need to pick out every single strand of hair. We can just keep this quite broad, but it's really important the part where it kind of almost flips over from the top of the helmet to where it starts to flow back. That's really the part we need to focus on. You can see me here, just nice and broad. We're almost kind of like filling up that entire kind of like curved element on the front there. That's just being kind of entirely painted with Diabolic Plum. I think this is kind of practicing this on custodians, I think will help you just to get hair right just in general. The way that we highlight hair is slightly different to the way we might highlight other materials, because often hair is glossy. When you look at hair in the main, it's pretty glossy. Well, healthy hair often is, but because it's glossy, light reflects off of it in certain ways, and I think that's what we want to do here. We kind of think of maybe horsehair plume or something like that. I don't know what purple horses there are in the 31st millennium, but I'm imagining this was, it's washed, it's clean, therefore it is glossy. Just to speed things up, you can always use a hairdryer. Don't do it too hot though, especially on plastic miniatures, because you will never be able to bend them back into place. So use a medium heat. And what you saw me there creating was a mix between Diabolic Plum and Hexed Violet. So whenever I'm mixing colours, but the reason is because I just want a softer gradient between the colours. I just want the transitions to be softer, and we'll see this with the blade a little bit later. Now you can see with this next highlight up, I'm trying to be a little bit tighter with my highlights, so I'm almost kind of all the highlights I've created so far, I'm just keeping it within those highlights, so you can still see the Diabolic Plum from before, but everything's a little bit tighter. And this is the part here that's really important. Things that the top of these kind of like longer strands, you can kind of focus on the top of them, but it's really this part here, the part where it starts to curl over, That's the part that we really need to focus on the highlight. I've put in a lot of footage here because I think that I think this is a part you really want to get right. Right, the gold, important that we get that right. The plume, important that we get that right. The blade, important that we get that right. I often see the leathers on Custodes as almost like secondary, which is why I've used speed paint. So yeah, those three elements, it's important that we get those bits right. Right, we're going to use hexed. I keep on saying hexed like, and that's not at all. Hexed Violet, with just a tiniest dash of Diabolic Plum in there, so it's not just pure Hexed Violet so far. And you can see me here just being really careful with these just itty bitty highlights here, just where the plume just starts to, would start to bend, where the light essentially would hit it. And I'm being more careful. I'm almost using like individual brush strokes that you can see, whereas before I was being much broader, and I tend to do just the ends as well, where I think the light might catch it. So you've almost got it at the beginning and at the end with these top highlights as well. But yeah, you can start to see it's really coming together now. And I just really like. I think this color is really nice. Actually, I think when I did it, I was like, oh yeah, this works for me. This is nice. You can see with the leather as well, at this point, I've added a second coat of the grim black. And then what I will end up doing is adding, because when I put it on, it was actually quite glossy. And of course, leather can be glossy, but I wanted kind of an older looking material. So I just used some matte varnish over the black elements. On the leathers in particular, because I just wanted to matte it down. It did, as I say, it dried quite shiny. That might be because I didn't shake the bottle enough, but I just knocked it back with a little bit of matte varnish. And then this is just our tippity top highlights going in with Hexed Violet. This is our last highlight that we will do, just on those tippity top areas, on the finest parts here, and then that will be our plume, our purple plume, done. Right, the silver element's really simple. Cobalt Metal color, which is kind of like a blue metal color that the army painter does. Then I hit it with blue tone. Then I dry brushed it with Mithril Silver, and that was it. So we got some blue silvers in there, blue steels, and that's just to reflect the sky. Right, Deep Azure Turquise Siren. And then the third colour that we're going to use is our Marine Mist. Now, these are all from the turquoises. These are from the Flexible Triad. There's the darkest one, the lightest one, and there's one Turquoise Siren is somewhere in the middle. And we're going to paint the blade now. Now, in similar way, I put in quite a lot of footage when painting the blade. But the principles are going to be pretty similar to how we did the plume, which was that we're going to use mixes, as you can see me creating here, and then the mid mixes are just helping to soften the transitions. So the more transitions that we create, going up to that lighter and lighter and lighter marine mist, the more we create, the less like glazing that we have to do, and the less you can see the differences between those layers. We want nice, especially with energized blades, we want nice soft transitions between them. Now, this is useful if you don't have all 6 of the paints within the Flexible Triad. If you have all 6 within the Flexible Triad, just use all 6 of those, right? So what I'm trying to do is just show you guys that you can make mid colors, but actually I also have accessible kind of all of the 6, and I could have just used all of the 6 here. So just want to show you different ways to use these paints, especially if you don't have all 6. We're just using a base coat of Deep Azure, really lovely color. And then our next highlight is going to be that Deep Azure plus Turquise Siren, 50-50 mix. And what you can see me doing, where that blade starts to curve, that's where I'm going to want my highlight. So at the very tippity top and at the very bottom and on the flat panel that I'm not hitting, I'm keeping that the Deep Azure. And then the mix that I've created, I'm just, you know, hitting within there. And every time I move up through a color, the band of light is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So before it was 100%, then I'm hitting it with 80. Now I'm currently hitting, you know, etc., etc. So we just work through the band of light. Where that blade just the curve on that blade, that's the part that we really need to focus on. And then you just bring it in, bring it in, bring it in, and then that's how we can get a nice transition. And what you can see here is the marine mist, me going in with a final one. With the marine mist, it's almost like a white color. Basically, it's not white. If you were to compare it to white in the hand, it's not at all, but against this blue here, it does look white. And then I'm just going around and just edge highlighting it with pure marine mist. I've also used marine mist in that kind of like tippity top highlight as well, so you can just edge the blade with that pure marine mist, and it's going to make it look like a really nice kind of energized blade. Take your time with this, because we've done it energized and not silver. It's going to be people's eyes are going to be drawn towards it, so it's important that we get this bit right. The gems, nice and simple on this one. We spent a long time on everything else, so we're just going to do this nice and quickly. So the gems are all painted with Mithril Silver, your brightest possible silver that you have, and then I'm using True Blood. That's right, a blood effect paint, and I'm going to paint the gems with this blood effect paint, and that's your gem. That's it. Because the True Blood is already a glossy red color, we don't need to go over it with gloss at all. It's really nice and shiny in the hand already, and then you just go around and you hit it with the True Blood. And then this is also what I did for the eye lenses as well. So I did them all. Yeah, I did them matching basically. Now you could choose a purple if you wanted to. You could choose a green, whatever you think is best. You could go over it with speed paint, and then go over it with gloss varnish. But I just really like this for quick and simple, easy gems. We spent a long time on everything else. Let's make this part quick and easy, because there's a lot of gems to get through on this. And then this is the model. This is it. This is it complete. It really is as simple as that, and actually looks pretty cool. I think the highlights and the shading's really dynamic, and yeah, that horsehair or the purple horsehair plume and the energized blade all looks together really nice, and I think that you could probably create an army of custodians pretty quickly with this. I've done a basing tutorial recently, so you can go have a look at how I did that. It's a pretty simple basing tutorial, but with that, guys, I'm gonna leave it there. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to comment and don't forget to subscribe, and I hope this one has been useful. See you on the next one.